Hello lovely jewelers, welcome to another video. Today I thought I would talk to you a bit about my own personal creative process when it comes to designing a new collection. I know there's so many different ways about going about this and there's no real right or wrong, so please don't feel bad about that if yours is different to mine. But I just thought I'd share a little bit more of a personal side into my jewelry business in terms of the way that I like to do things. So let's jump into it. So first of all, what I like to do is really think of the big picture. So take myself out of the jewelry business for a moment and look at it from an objective perspective. So in this process, I like to think about who my target audience is, obviously what my USP is, and that really helps me then to think of something that fits within that. So obviously when I'm creating a new collection, I want to be able to fit in with what there already is in my brand and on my website and everywhere else that I sell my jewelry. But I also want to obviously make it a bit different. So coming from a different angle. So within the same umbrella idea, there's still so many different ways you can approach creating a collection. So after I've got this bigger idea, it's like, okay, who's my target audience? What kind of niche do I fit into and what's my USP? I should already have that nice and clear, which I do. So I have Scandinavian minimalist style jewelry. So that's the descriptive way I would describe my jewelry. And it is also really specifically targeted towards women and building up self-confidence. So within that, I can then explore different inspirations and different ideas. So say, for example, I have an idea for a collection about building confidence. Then underneath that, I can then explore what that means to me and think about ways of representing that idea. And in that process, obviously, there's once again, so many different ways about coming up with the actual designs and ideas of a collection. So some people like to do lots of drawings beforehand. Personally, I like to do like little rough sketches, but I actually really much prefer when I am working in a 3D material, such as paper, wax, wire, something that I can actually see it come to life a little bit more, because I'm very visual. And even back in university, when I had to draw the ideas for the sculptures, I found it really hard to do that because I can picture it in my head and I know what it needs to look like, but trying to draw it the way that I see it in my head always kind of felt like an obstacle, like it didn't help me to think through the process better. So what I like to do is jump into the materials in some rough way first, and then just churn out loads and loads of different prototypes, slight variations, and not feeling too precious about them. So just like, oh, what about this? Oh, what about this? What about this? So in the past, I used to work a lot with sheet. So that meant the best way for me to work up my designs was through paper. So folding paper, cutting different shapes and manipulating it to see what kind of designs I could come up with. And that worked really, really well. And then I expanded and tried different techniques. So this is where you need to make the decision on what kind of style jewelry you plan on making and what techniques you're going to use to make that. So thinking either, is it paper, is it wax or wire? Like what are the easily accessible materials that you can use to just create some kind of model to get a feel for it, really roughly. And then once you have those little first batch of prototypes, then what you can do is have a look at them. So that's what I do, is then I'll put them next to each other. I'll arrange them in like my order of favorite to least favorite, and then ditch a bunch of them, maybe rework some other ones. So I just have lots to choose from, so that when I am going to then make it out of the actual material, then I know that I've really worked through that idea a lot before I've even started using anything out of silver or obviously gold. So that way I don't feel scared to try it, and I can just try loads. And then once I have selected my favorite ones, then I'll go to the next prototyping stage, where I make it out of either brass or copper usually, or silver sometimes if I'm really sure what it's going to look like and I have the exact piece of metal in silver and I'm pretty sure it's going to look good, then I'll just jump into the silver. But usually I work in brass, actually, just because I prefer the color of it and it looks like gold. And then I will make a still a fairly rough mock-up of that. So I'm not gonna like file anything or like, you know, do it completely perfectly, but just so that I can see what it's gonna look like. And then once I've had a look at that, and if I'm happy with that, then I'll put that to side and I'll do the same process with each of the designs that I like. So I end up with, say, like, I don't know, 15 different pieces that I like the potential that they have. And then after that, based on that, you know, putting it on, wearing it, looking in the mirror, you know, all of that whole thing, getting a feel for it. If I'm still excited about them, then I will make those out of the actual material that I plan on making them out of. So usually for me, that's silver. And then I will, after that, then it's a really good idea to actually wear the piece. And this is kind of like my testing phase. So do I like it? Am I still in love with it? Can I see myself wearing this for a long time? Am I excited about the piece? You know, in the morning you wake up and oh yeah, you know, you're excited about that new ring and it just makes you feel really good. Then also feeling it for comfort, like is it a design, maybe it's got something pointy on it, or, you know, maybe it's a little bit unusual. Is it actually comfortable? Because if not, if it's gonna hook on a lot of things and you wanna keep taking it off, then I'll maybe rework that one or rethink that. So I always try and think practically in that sense as well. And once I've worn that and, you know, maybe asked a couple of friends, if I've, you know, seen some people, what do you think of it? Would you wear it? And get a feel for that. And also within my selection, I want to make sure that I at least have some lower price point entry items, and then obviously the top end like statement piece. And then mainly you want to actually have everything in between. So the middle price point pieces, because there's another video where I speak about how to design collections in a bit more detail. You want to have the entry level pieces where it's a nice, quick, easy buy, where you can either buy it as a gift for a friend or it's more of a spontaneous purchase for yourself. And then you want to have the more expensive items, which are the really like glorified items that are really like beautiful and people want a piece of, but maybe they can't afford that piece, so then they buy more from the mid-range. The way that this works is if you have the higher price point, the lower price point, the midpoint seems like such a good deal. Whereas if everything is priced the same, then there's nothing to really weigh it out of, like, oh, that's a good deal. You see what I mean? Like, so if everything's priced the same, then you don't know if you're getting a good deal or not, because you can't tell. And then the choice becomes a little bit overwhelming as well, because like, oh, this one, or this one, or this one, because price does obviously influence the purchase as well to an extent, obviously besides them liking the piece. But that is something to consider as well. So I always make sure that within everything that I've got some lower end, middle, and higher end. And even actually before I start designing, I have in mind the price point, like the price range that I want that collection to have, keeping in mind my target audience and having experience with previous collections and knowing what price points work well for them. So that is something that I always like to consider in the beginning as well. So once I'm sure that I have the right price points and I am happy with everything and I've made a minimized selection, because I might like all 15 of them, but if I were to launch the whole 15 as a collection and say I've got like 5 rings, 5 necklaces, 5 earrings, then that becomes quite overwhelming for the customer. So you need to remember that you're curating something for them. So if you give them too much choice, then it becomes hard for them to choose. So that's where I need to make that decision first, personally, and be like, okay, out of these ones, what gives enough variety? So like, say for example, little stud earrings and like bigger earrings, like what different types of people, what styles do they have within obviously my USP that they might want. So offering enough different options like that, but without giving them like 5 dangly earrings. I don't know if that's what you really call them, but I call them dangly earrings, the ones that dangle. And then they're like, I don't know, I like them all. And then they don't want to choose. So in that way, I try and minimize that so that I have a couple of each design with enough difference between each one to give them a clearer idea of which one to choose. But if they're really similar, then it can easily become too overwhelming in terms of not making a decision and then not making a purchase. So once I'm happy with that, go ahead and make them. And that's pretty much how I go about making my collections. So I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to seeing you next week in another video. Bye.